David John Gilmour was born in Cambridge, England on the 6th of March, 1946. His father was a zoology lecturer at the University of Cambridge, and his mom was a teacher and later a film editor at the BBC. Listening to Bill Haley, Elvis, and the Everly Brothers sparked his interest in playing guitar. He borrowed his first guitar from a neighbor and by some accounts, never returned it. At age 11, Gilmour was attending the Peirce School on Hills Road, Cambridge, and met Syd Barrett and Roger Waters, who attended another school on Hills Road. In '62, he began attending Cambridge College of Arts and Technology, where Barrett was also a student. Gilmour and Barrett would practice guitar during lunch breaks. Dropping out of his language program at Cambridge, the two would travel to France and Spain, busking as they went. Later, back in London, Gilmour watched Pink Floyd record See Emily Play and was shocked when Barrett didn't recognize him. Sadly, Barrett's struggles with mental illness had already begun. It was in December '67 that Pink Floyd's drummer Nick Mason asked Gilmour to join the band to cover the guitar parts as Barrett was becoming increasingly undependable for live work. For his 21st birthday, David's parents had bought him his first Fender, a white Telecaster with a rosewood fingerboard. It's assumed that this guitar was either a '66 or '67, but others place it as an early '60s guitar. Sadly, we don't know for sure because the guitar was lost by an airline in January of '68 during the band's first tour of the U.S. Gilmour used the guitar in his previous band Bullet when he was living in France and then in his earliest days of Pink Floyd. That guitar was the one he used on Saucerful of Secrets. By March of '68, working with Barrett in any way had become impossible, and Syd agreed to leave the band. At that point, Gilmour moved to lead vocal duties along with keyboardist Richard Wright. On the back of Imaguma, you can see a late '50s Telecaster with a natural brown finish. He bought this guitar after his white Tele was lost. As he did on many of his Telecasters, the cover of the neck pickup was removed. In 1974, Gilmour would be seen with a '59 Telecaster Custom on an early version of Dogs that would later go on Animals. The guitar had a 3-color burst, 3-ply white pickguard, and a D-shaped neck with a rosewood board. At that point, the guitar had a humbucking pickup in the neck. When he used the guitar on tour to support Animal, he switched it back to a standard Tele neck pickup. Gilmour's '55 Esquire was famously given or sold to him by Seymour Duncan around '75 or '76. The guitar had already had significant wear when he got it, and it led David to name it Workmate after the Black & Decker workbench of the same name. David's Esquire had a neck pickup made and installed for him by Duncan. Seymour Duncan worked at Fender at the time. The 3-color burst, unusual for a '55, is reportedly part of a very small batch that Fender made that year. The 3-color burst would not be an official color at Fender until 1959. The guitar was shown on David's About Face album cover. It was famously used on Run Like Hell, Off the Wall, and also then on that tour. After this, it was put in storage and was seen only rarely, and in particular the Royal Albert Hall performance in 2016. Once the old Telecasters were put away, David began using a stock '52 reissue that he'd bought in the batch of guitars he acquired in '84 at the same time he'd bought his red Strat. In the end, he'd actually had 2 of them on the road, keeping one in drop D for Run Like Hell and another in standard tuning for Astronomy Domine. David's had a number of important acoustics over the years. In the early '70s, he was seen using a Gibson J45. In the Live at Pompeii show in 2016, he's seen playing a slope-shoulder Gibson with parallel illograms and a natural top. Generally, this would denote a country and western model from the late '50s. If you want to learn more about those, see my video on the Gibson Jumbos. In the mid-'90s, he was seen playing a mid-'80s Gibson J200 celebrity model. According to his guitar tech, Phil Taylor, David bought 3 of these very limited run of 90 guitars because he loves the sound and the feel. But his most notable acoustic is his Martin D35, reportedly purchased on the street outside of Manny's Music in New York in the '70s. This would be David's primary acoustic guitar in both Pink Floyd and on his solo albums. The guitar would be sold at Christie's at the auction in 2019 for $1,200,000. David's main 12-string was a Martin D12-28, which he used for 40 years and can be heard on Wish You Were Here. He's always said that that guitar gave him that song. The 12-string sold for $1,095,000 at the Christie's auction. A couple of days before the white Telecaster was lost during the U.S. tour, the band bought him his first Stratocaster. The guitar was either a '66 or '67, when the first large headstocks were used but before the introduction of the Bullet truss rod. It was an Olympic white body with a white pickguard and a rosewood board neck. It would be his main guitar from late in '68 to the early months of '70s when it was stolen on May 16, 1970, with all of Pink Floyd's backline when they were in New Orleans on tour. Though most of the other gear was recovered, over the years, David's guitars were never returned. When all their gear was stolen, the band was forced to cancel the rest of the tour, but on their way home, they would stop at Manny's in New York. Ironically, David had just bought a black Strat at Manny's just a few weeks before, but it was stolen along with all the other gear in New Orleans. And on that second stop at Manny's, he bought what would universally be called the Black Strat. The guitar made its debut with the band at the Bath Festival in June of '70. The guitar has gone through extensive modifications over the years, and only the original body remains. Starting life as a '68 or '69 alder body with black painted finish over an original sunburst finish. It had the late '60s large headstock, a maple cap neck, and 21 frets. When sold at Christie's, the following parts were in place. The original sunburst alder body, oversprayed in black. A 1983 Fullerton-era 57 reissue C-shaped neck with a 7.25-inch fingerboard radius and 21 vintage-style frets. Fender Godot vintage-style tuners, one-ply beveled black 11-hole pickguard. Neck and middle pickups dated to 1971 had been part of an entire pickguard installed in '73. And a Seymour Duncan custom-wound SSL 1C bridge pickup, which was added in '79. The original bridge was refitted in '97 after the guitar had worn a Kahler tremolo at one point. You can see the area filled where the big routing was done for the Kahler. There was a 5-way pickup selector switch replaced the original 3-way switch in '85. And his famously shortened tremolo arm that's 4 1/2 inches long was in place. David used the Black Strat from 1970 till 1984 when he gave the guitar to the Hard Rock Cafe. He retrieved the guitar in 1997. Widely considered to be one of the most important guitars in rock music, this was Gilmour's main guitar on metal, Live at Pompeii, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall, The Final Cut, and all of David's solo albums across the dates above. The guitar would be sold along with 125 of his other guitars at auction at Christie's in 2019. The Black Strat was sold to American businessman Jim Isray for $3,975,000. At the time, this was a new record price for a guitar. The full history of the Black Strat would take an entire video in itself, and that may yet be done here on the channel. Let me know if that's something you need to see in the comments. The second most recognizable guitar from David's history is the Candy Apple Red 1983 vintage reissue 57 Stratocaster. The story goes that early in '84, David's guitar tech, Phil Taylor, went to the Fender warehouse in Enfield, Middlesex, England, and played a bunch of the new reissue guitars from Fender, who at the time was still in Fullerton, California. He did this because David had decided he didn't want to tour with his old guitars any longer, as they'd begun to rapidly increase in value. Taylor came home with at least 7 guitars from Fender's then brand new line of American vintage reissue guitars, including the Candy Apple Red V57, a vintage white V57 Strat that would serve as the main guitar on the About Face and Momentary Lapse of Reason tour, and a Sunburst V57 that he'd play at Live Aid in '85. Also a Fiesta Red V62 Strat and a Butterscotch V52 Telecaster. He also got a black Elite Strat that would serve as a backup for the Black Strat for a time, and a black V57 Strat that would end up being used by second guitarists on tour, like Phil Manzanera on the 2006 On an Island tour. Back in the early '80s, starting production after Fender evaluated several Japanese-made guitars, these early '80s vintage reissue guitars were in the last days of CBS Fender. Many of the luthiers who trained specifically to bring this line to life would become the first people to work at the Fender Custom Shop a few years later. Highly collectible today, these '80s Fullerton reissue guitars are thought of as some of the best Fender reissues ever made. Often mentioned as being an '84, it's more likely that the Candy Apple Red Strat is an '83, as it had to make the journey from California to the UK to be present in the warehouse on that fateful day. The guitar has a '50s contour Candy Apple Red nitro finish alder body, a 7 1/4-inch radius C-shaped nitro vintage tint neck, an 8-hole single-ply white pickguard, and it originally came with '50s style pickups. In the summer of '85, the EMG SA single-coil pickups and SPC and EXG active tone controls were installed. David played the guitar in this form with Brian Ferry at Live Aid. He also had the shortened trem arm by that point. David moved to the EMGs to reduce or eliminate noise from the long cable he was using, and the ever-growing lighting rigs as well. Though purists might well scoff at this choice, David felt that the pickups were very close to the sound of the original vintage pickups. To get the sound he wanted, he ran the pickups very low in the pickguard, even having the body routing increased to get them lower in the pickguard. The red guitar would be heavily used on Momentary Lapse of Reason, along with many other guitars, including a Steinberger GL3T. After using the Cream 57 Fullerton with EMGs on the road, he'd settled into using the red guitar in '88 as his main performance and recording guitar, and it would stay so until 2005, when he went back to the black Strat. When he went back to the black Strat, he'd moved away from using the EMGs in favor of true single coils again, saying that he decided that they didn't sound quite as stratty. The red guitar was sold at the Christie's auction in 2019 for $650,000.